The sky over Geneva was dark, the kind of heavy night that weighed on the city like a well-kept secret. Inside a luxury penthouse overlooking the tranquil waters of Lake Geneva, Elena Rybolovleva sat in silence, her fingers tapping against the polished marble countertop. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh orchids, yet to her it was suffocating. Her world had once been gilded with the finest things money could buy: private jets, secluded Mediterranean villas, a life only the elite could imagine. Yet in this moment, all of it felt like a grand illusion. She looked at the letter before her, a neatly folded cream-colored envelope embossed with her name, the kind of letter that was never good news. Slowly she unfolded it, her heart pounding. The words inside were as sharp as shattered glass. Dmitry Rybolovlev, her husband of over 2 decades, was initiating steps to secure his fortune without her. Elena's lips trembled as she read between the lines. This wasn't just paperwork. This was war. It had begun quietly, like a whisper through the corridors of their marriage. Subtle changes in Dmitry's behavior, late-night phone calls, distant glances across dinner tables. For years, she had convinced herself that these were minor shifts, the inevitable consequence of a man who had built an empire. But deep down, she had known. The clues had been there: the offshore accounts, the hidden trusts, the sudden disappearance of priceless art pieces from their collection. And now, with this letter, the truth was undeniable. Dmitry was preparing for a life where she no longer existed. She clenched her fists. The world saw him as a powerful businessman, a billionaire who had turned a potash empire into a fortune. To her, he was something else entirely. A man who had once whispered promises of forever, only to rewrite the ending without her. Elena's eyes burned not with sadness, but with something more potent: determination. If Dmitry wanted a fight, he was going to get one. Geneva's morning sun filtered through the high-rise windows, illuminating the papers scattered across Elena's desk. The city was waking up, but her world was on the brink of collapsing. She had spent the night piecing together fragments of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was part of. Dmitry had been moving money, huge sums, out of reach. The luxurious apartments in New York, the mega mansion in Palm Beach, the prized art collection that once decorated their homes, all of it was slipping away, hidden behind a fortress of offshore trusts and secretive financial maneuvers. Elena wasn't naive. She had seen enough among the world's wealthiest circles to understand the game. Wealth wasn't just about money, it was about power, control, and strategy. And Dmitry had played this game long before she ever knew there were rules. The last few years had been a master class in deception. She recalled the lavish gifts, the quiet reassurances, the way he had subtly brushed off her concerns, all distractions. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he had been constructing an elaborate financial labyrinth, a web of shell companies, international accounts, and legal shields designed to ensure that if she ever walked away, she'd leave with nothing. But she wasn't walking away. She was stepping into the fight. Elena reached for her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd need. Geneva's best divorce attorney? The voice on the other end answered, crisp and professional. She took a breath. I need to know how much of my husband's fortune I can take. Silence. Then the lawyer's voice, calm but firm. How much do you want? Elena stared out at the pristine lake view, her reflection staring back at her. Everything. She had built this life with him. She had endured the sacrifices, the long stretches of loneliness, the constant shadow of power and privilege. And now, Dmitri wanted to erase her from the equation, not without a fight. And as the first lawsuit was drafted, as the legal papers began their journey through the Swiss court system, the world had no idea that one of the most expensive divorces in history was about to unfold. The legal papers were served on a crisp autumn morning, delivered with the precision of a well-executed chess move. Elena had made the first strike. For the first time in his life, Dmitri Rybolovlev, one of the wealthiest men in Russia, a titan of the global business elite, was on the defensive. He read the papers in silence. A $6 billion claim. The number alone was staggering, even for a man of his immense fortune, half of everything. He exhaled slowly. So, this was how it was going to be. Dmitri had spent decades perfecting the art of control, of markets, of investments, of people. But he had underestimated Elena. He had assumed she would take whatever settlement he quietly offered and disappear into the background, like so many others in his world. He was wrong. Still, if Elena wanted a war, she was stepping onto his battlefield. That same evening, Dmitri's private jet touched down in Monaco, the glittering playground of billionaires and financial ghosts. A city where money didn't just exist. It disappeared. His most trusted financial advisors were already waiting. These weren't just accountants. They were the architects of secrecy, men who could make billions evaporate into the abyss of offshore trusts and anonymous corporations. "She's coming after the assets," Dmitri said, settling into the leather chair of his penthouse office. "She thinks she has a claim to them." The head of his legal team, a sharp-eyed man with decades of experience shielding the ultra-wealthy, set down a thick folder. "We've anticipated this. The assets aren't in your name." Dmitri nodded. He had built his empire like a fortress, and no one, not even his wife, was going to break in. The paintings, held by a trust in the British Virgin Islands, the real estate, owned by offshore corporations, the bank accounts, spread across jurisdictions where prying eyes weren't welcome. On paper, Dmitri Rybolovlev barely existed. "We'll make sure she gets nothing," his lawyer assured him. "This case won't last long." Dmitri leaned back, his mind already moving 3 steps ahead. Elena had made her move, but she didn't realize she was playing against a grandmaster. He poured himself a drink, staring out at the Monaco skyline. Let her fight. He wasn't just going to win, he was going to erase her from history. Elena had no idea what was coming, and the world was about to witness one of the most ruthless divorce battles of all time. Elena knew the game Dmitri was playing, but what he didn't realize was that she had been studying him for years. She wasn't the naive woman he once thought she was, the wife who smiled at gala events while he orchestrated billion-dollar deals behind closed doors. She had watched, she had listened, and now she was ready to expose the one thing that terrified him more than losing money, losing control. Her legal team arrived at the courthouse armed with documents that would shake the foundations of Dmitri's carefully built empire. Elena wasn't just fighting for a divorce settlement, she was dismantling his entire financial strategy. The allegations were explosive. Dmitri had hidden billions in offshore accounts. He had illegally transferred assets to avoid sharing them. He had used complex trusts to manipulate the system. Swiss courts weren't just reviewing a high-net-worth divorce anymore. This had become a global financial scandal. The moment the legal filings went public, the media storm began. Elena Rybolovleva takes on the Russian billionaire, the New York Times, inside the world's most expensive divorce, The Guardian, the wife who could take down an empire, Financial Times. For Dmitri, this wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was an attack on his legacy. The Geneva court ruled in Elena's favor. The decision was historic. $4.5 billion. The headlines exploded, one of the largest divorce settlements in history. Elena had done the impossible. She had torn through the layers of secrecy and exposed the one thing the ultra-rich feared most: public accountability. Dmitri's empire, once impenetrable, had been cracked open for the world to see. But this wasn't over. Dmitri wasn't a man who lost. The court's ruling was supposed to be the end of the battle. It was just the beginning. For the first time in his life, Dmitri Rybolovlev had been defeated. A judge had ruled that he owed Elena $4.5 billion, half of his fortune. The world watched, fascinated, as the Russian oligarch, known for his cunning and control, had been cornered. But what the world didn't know was that Dmitri had no intention of paying. The morning after the ruling, Dmitri sat in a private office overlooking Monaco's coastline. His legal team, financial advisors, and offshore banking specialists filled the room. "She won't see a cent," his lead attorney assured him. Dmitri tapped his fingers against the table, his mind already working through the options. Elena had played her move. Now it was time for his counterattack. The first step: erase the money. While Elena celebrated her legal victory, Dmitri's team executed a strategy that had been in motion for years. His billions didn't exist in bank accounts. They were hidden in assets: yachts, real estate, and most importantly, art. One by one, his financial advisors moved the final pieces into place. The offshore trusts tightened their grip on the assets. Ownership of properties changed overnight, shifting to anonymous corporations. The art collection, valued at over $2 billion, vanished. Elena might have won on paper, but Dmitri was about to teach her a brutal lesson. A year after the record-breaking settlement, Dmitri's legal team struck back. His lawyers filed an appeal in the Swiss court, arguing that the ruling was unfair, that assets had been incorrectly assessed, and, most importantly, that many of the billions Elena was claiming weren't in his name. Dmitri had turned the court system into a battlefield, and this time he had the advantage. Months passed. The legal war dragged on. Then the unthinkable happened. The Swiss court overturned the original ruling. The $4.5 billion judgment, gone. Instead, Elena was awarded a fraction of the amount, just $600 million. The world gasped. How had he done it? Simple. He had built an empire designed to be untouchable. Elena sat in silence, staring at the new ruling. This wasn't justice. This was power. True power, the kind that the world's richest men wielded like a weapon. She had fought harder than anyone ever had against Dmitri Rybolovlev, and she had still lost. Or had she? Because while Dmitri had saved his billions, he had lost something far more valuable: his secrets. Dmitri Rybolovlev had done the impossible. He had turned a $4.5 billion loss into a $600 million payout, walking away with his empire intact. The legal battle was over, but the war wasn't, because while Dmitri had won in court, the world had been watching, and what they saw was a billionaire who had played the system, who had used hidden trusts, offshore accounts, and financial loopholes to escape one of the largest divorce settlements in history. The media wasn't letting this go. A year after the final ruling, Dmitri was still one of the richest men in the world. But his name was everywhere for the wrong reasons. Then came the leak. In 2016, the Panama Papers were released, a massive investigation into secret offshore accounts. And Dmitri's name was all over them. Documents exposed how he had secretly used offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands to shield his assets, including the priceless art collection that mysteriously disappeared before the divorce settlement. The same headlines that once praised him now tore him apart. How a Russian billionaire outsmarted his wife and the law. The Guardian, the hidden empire of Dmitry Rybolovlev. The New York Times, offshore shells and secret wealth, inside the Rybolovlev scandal. BBC, what had once been his greatest victory, had become his biggest liability. Elena had lost billions, but she had exposed the truth. Governments started paying attention, lawsuits followed, investigations into Russian oligarchs intensified. And Dmitri? He was still rich, still powerful. But his name was forever tainted. He was no longer just a billionaire. He was a symbol of financial secrecy, of how the ultra-wealthy played by different rules. Elena may not have taken half his fortune, but she had taken something far more valuable, his untouchable status, and that was priceless. Dmitry Rybolovlev remains one of the richest men in the world. But his battle with Elena became a cautionary tale, a story about power, greed, and the limits of wealth. Because no matter how much money you have, some prices can't be paid.